think it's wonderful to be in front of all of you. I think while Rishi did speak a lot about my focus on career, I think in three simple words, I've worked in cigarettes, I've worked in boots, and now I'm working for drugs. There is a career in vice as well, so I think, and you can read finance and all these industries. I think, Rishi told me that you are effectively the first year, in a manner of speaking, into the campus, and that's fantastic, because I do think that I think you should be very proud of yourself in terms of come to IIM Indore, actually, great institution, and especially with Rishi, I think you have lots to learn, so be proud of yourself, actually. I think that is very, very important, extremely proud of yourself, because it's not easy to sort of come into these schools, and it needs a lot of, achievement and dedication and hard work, and you have done that, you have demonstrated that. So I think the first thing is, let's clap for all of you, please. I think it's very important to do that, actually. What I thought, and as this slide says, very sorry, this mic here. Yeah. And as this slide says, the life of promise. In fact, I would say it's a life of greatness that all of you should look forward to, actually, and aspire for. And that's really what I thought I would talk about a little bit today, actually. There are really three parts to what I want to say today. I think the first part is life at the institute as you come. I think it's very important. It's a very important part of your own experience, and you discover as you sort of go through it. It probably defines you in certain ways, actually. So I think there is life at the institute, which you should be cognizant of. The second is, as you go to a career, whether entrepreneurial or whether it is a corporate career, I think there are certain things that I think there are at least learnings from my life. I'm not going to give you academic stuff in this conversation, actually. It's at least I can speak about my own career and what I learned from it, actually. And so there are things that maybe helps you as I sort of speak about it, and mine may not be the best example, and I guess you will need to shape your own life as you go forward, but there's a bit about career. And there's a third bit, which is perhaps philosophical, which is about what kind of a life you want to lead. I think there's a third bit, and I think all these things are kind of important, actually. So let me do, so I'm going to make it anecdotal. And this presentation is not a lot of slides in terms of messages and sort of complex PowerPoints. It is not. One of the things I do is that I'm as probably as big a Facebook user as all of you are, actually. I do sort of follow certain people, and when I see some interesting quotations, I sort of promptly save it into my mobile, actually, and with Google Photos, it kind of automatically archives, actually. Very inspiring, at least for me, it's inspiring. And all I'm trying to do in this is kind of use some of those things that I at least liked, actually, to sort of relate to my own life story. So today is an amazing day. Today is going to be amazing. And this is not just a statement, it's an attitude. I think, for instance, when I woke up this morning, the flight was at 10:50. It was not something at 8 o'clock in the morning that I had to get up at 5:30 to come here. No, it was 10:50, so I could get up at 7:30 in the morning, comfortably have breakfast and leave for the airport. Stand in front of you and talk. It's fantastic. It's an amazing day. And I think the simple message here is that I think if each one of us begins our day to say that this is going to be an amazing day, and today is an amazing day, and as it stays there at the bottom, true story. I think that defines the attitude, is what I would say, actually. I just thought, we should begin with something like that. Stay positive, actually. I think what you'll discover, I think in places like IIM, and in terms of your own learning journey, actually, I think it's a very important part of what we become. I think the formative years is going to be so important, actually. And so I think there is merit in sort of thinking about what your life in campus is going to be. I remember when I came to campus in 1985, I just passed, just finished my chartered accountancy. I was a rank holder, so when I came to Ahmedabad, I had my own view of myself, actually. That successful academic record, ranker and CA actually, and then you come to IIM. And then you find that in an accounting subject, the engineer beats you actually. And in a mathematical subject, you end up doing better than the IIT guy who was kind of coming to the campus. So it's a great level actually. So one of the big things that you will notice as you go through the course at IIM is that it's a big level. All your assumptions about yourself will kind of, to some extent, be destroyed actually. And it's a bit humbling, and you all need a bit of thick skin to accept that there are people around you who are better than you are actually. And I think that's the first thing. So therefore, while you sort of get into this learning in IIMs, I think there's a lot of unlearning in terms of your own assumptions that you will experience actually. I think the beauty of campuses like this and the batches like this is, I think, the whole batch itself actually. It's just, you make lifelong kind of friends as you kind of come together, and you'll find that there are people who are fantastic. When I grew up, we came from a very, very low middle class family, and all that we were taught was that study. You can do debates, you can do elocutions, you can do quizzing, but sports, no. So sports was something seen as, people who did sports didn't study actually. And that's the kind of, that's the way at least my parents taught me. Nothing wrong with that, but that was one of the ways in which at least we grew up actually. And here you come to IIM, and then you find that there's somebody fantastic at sports, fantastic at lots of other things, and also fantastic at studies actually. So I think that's, you will discover such brilliant people amongst your batch actually. I remember in my batch, and I'm going to maybe create some problems for Rishi as I say, there was a guy who was a ventriloquist actually. So he used to make pigeon sounds in the classrooms actually. Really, I'm not joking, it's true, absolutely true story. Pigeon sounds in the classroom. And he would appear half asleep in the class actually. And really, and many times the professors have said, this guy is not following. And so they will pull him up and say, can you explain this particular hypothesis? And the guy will come up and give a completely, tangential but brilliant explanation to whatever was being taught actually. And so you find people like that in campuses actually. And I think, and you'll find that amongst yourselves actually. And there was this, and there was this girl I remember on campus, very, very brilliant, 4-hour exams she would go to. And she would finish it in 1.5 hours. We would still be struggling in terms of finishing it. And balance, she would do crosswords in the exam hall actually. And you know what, whether she spent 1.5 hours doing it or we spent 4 hours writing the paper, she'd probably get an A minus and I'll probably get a C minus actually. So I'm saying, you'll find people like that. And there have been instances in exams where, you get complex cases and you don't know what the hell to do actually. So I've actually gone to the DJ room, listened to some music, actually figuring out what am I going to write in the paper actually. And that also you'll experience, in terms of these campus lives actually. Because that's the beauty of the campus life. And I think enjoy it. And therefore the first message is that enjoy the stint that you're going to spend time here with. Really enjoy it actually. And celebrate the fact that you're going to be with a bunch of extraordinary individuals around you actually. And sort of learn actually. And get inspired by each other is what I would say. To choose your subjects well, I think obviously there'll be some subjects which will be compulsory. But when it comes to electives, think a little bit about what you want to do. And experiment, apart from the core, if you want to do finance, maybe a couple of subjects on finance. But this is probably the best time when you can do other things actually. If you want to do marketing, do a few things in marketing to say you've done an MBA in marketing, but do other things as well. Explore, experiment actually. Liberal arts education is not very common in India actually. And the whole concept of liberal arts is all about education for education's sake in the widest and the broadest way actually. Therefore use it to experiment, because as you go into your careers, you may not get too many chances to experiment actually. And therefore, and certainly you become a much better individual if you sort of go through the, and make those choices which you can do in campus actually. So do that, I think I would say. And learn from and think about some of the case studies and all that, and you learn a lot. Case studies are not just about theoretical learning, it's also practical learning. I remember very distinctly a case that there used to be a legendary professor at Ahmedabad, Professor Mote, who taught us this case on Anand Milk Dairy. It's a milk dairy in Gujarat. And the case was very simple actually. It was about pricing of milk. And you would think, what is so complicated about pricing of milk actually? And I do not know how many of you know, have done a bit of operations research. How many of you know, have you done a bit of operations research? Has anyone done what? in this room? Engineers, okay, it's okay. I think fundamentally, okay, let me explain it in a simple fashion. How do you price milk? So if you're running, what does Anand Dairy do? It buys milk from farmers and it sells to consumers. So what is its objective actually? So is Anand Milk Dairy a regular corporation which says that my objective is to maximize profits? If it says, and it's the way you define yourself, if Anand Milk Dairy defines itself as a regular corporation which wants to maximize its profits, what would it do vis-a-vis its milk purchase? Would it pay high or would it pay low? It would probably pay low actually. What would it do in terms of the farmers? Will probably get lower paid actually. What would it do vis-a-vis the consumers? Would it price the milk high or would it price low? It would probably price high. So if your objective is profit maximization, then you have certain choices in front of you in terms of the price you pay for the milk from the milk farmers and the price that you charge your consumers. Whereas if you define yourself saying that I'm here to create a cooperative for farmers where my objective is to maximize the interest of the farmers, so what would you do? You would probably pay the farmers the best prices. You would probably charge the consumers the highest cost and make a profit. Or you might say, so that's one objective. So if you define yourself as taking care of farmer interests, you make certain choices in terms of what you make, in terms of pricing actually. But supposing you make a choice saying that, today the Nestle's of the world charge exorbitant prices actually. And recently, if you've read, the Maharashtra Milk Federation has said, I will give affordable milk to consumers actually. So if you define your objective as giving affordable milk to the end consumer, it's not 65 rupees a liter of milk, but I'll give it at 38 rupees actually. Then what would you do? You would try to buy milk at the lowest cost. And you would probably not make yourself too much of a profit actually. So the point I'm saying is that this case study on pricing of milk has so many implications as to what am I standing for. Is it standing for the profitability of the company? Is it standing for the welfare of the farmers? Is it standing for the welfare of the consumers actually? So, and the case study will simply be on pricing. Pricing, that's it. And it's up to you. These case studies are all open-ended case studies actually. And all three answers may be acceptable actually. And that's the beauty of sometimes the case method, where you sort of think about what are we really trying to do actually. So there's sometimes the learning that you do through these case studies is huge actually. It's absolutely huge. And so therefore I would say that use the opportunity for going beyond what is obvious in a case. Just learn, just go beyond it and say how does it relate to the day-to-day life. Because ultimately I think you are like a finishing school, MBA is like a finishing school, which kind of prepares you for a career outside actually. And ultimately you have to be in the real world. And so as you sort of prepare to go into the real world, I think relate whatever you're trying to learn to what does it mean in terms of real world. And if you're a decision maker, for instance, assume you're the chief executive of Anand Milk Dairy, what kind of choice will you make actually? And if you start thinking about it, I would say that your learning will get amplified. Will get amplified significantly actually. So there is so much opportunity, I would say, in terms of what you can achieve through these courses that you're doing, MBA or 5-year program, 2-year program, or whatever be the program you're doing. I think use it to sort of maximize the learning that you maximize the opportunity that you have here. You'll never again get an opportunity. After I left Ahmedabad, I used to come once in a while for campus recruitment. And then as a batch, we met up for our 25th reunion. We don't even meet as a batch actually. We have Yahoo groups or WhatsApp groups where you connect with your batch, but otherwise you just don't have an opportunity to connect with the batch for a long time actually. You may connect up if you are working in Bombay or London or wherever actually, the local groups can connect up. But you won't connect up again, and therefore there's a huge opportunity at multiple levels, learning, the connectedness, lots of things you can do. So I think use this opportunity to really grow in all facets is what I would say actually. So I think this is one of the quotes I do like. The difference between ordinary and extraordinary is that little extra. And I do think that having come here, you have demonstrated a little bit extra in terms of already being here. And as you sort of go through the next 2 years, I think do your bit in terms of working on the extra is what I would say actually. Something very simple, but and as you kind of think, you're one of the most privileged people. So just think about, what is a little extra that I can do in terms of making it worthwhile for me as I look forward actually. And I think the other thing I would say is that everything is about personal growth actually. Everything is about personal growth. Ultimately, the question for me has always been that have you grown personally in all methods so far going forward? And I think the important thing is, as this thing says, you need to get very intentional about personal growth. Personal growth doesn't happen by accident. If you have to academically excel in your class 10th as an example, you have to get intentional about excelling in class 10. If you have to excel in class 12, maybe in sports, my son, for instance, is a lead guitarist and he sort of plays some fantastic, you name it, rock and all that actually. But very intentional, hours of practice. If you see the tipping point, it says 10,000 hours of practice actually. In terms of making sure, excellence is about doing the same thing again and again and again and again in terms of, make intentional. So intentional growth, you need to get intentional about personal growth. And that's very, very important. Not just through the 2 years or 3 years or 5 years that you're going to be here, but also as you go forward in your career, just get very intentional about personal growth. And one of the things I would certainly recommend is that have some time for reflection actually. I think it's very important to have some time for reflection. For instance, as you've come into the course, I'm sure, your parents or your family must have told you a few things that you can do from here. And that probably gave you some thoughts to reflect about what you want to get out of this your stint here. But I would encourage you periodically, once in 3 months perhaps, to sort of step back, maybe when you take your morning jogs or whatever actually. Step back and spend some time in terms of thinking, spend some time on reflection. And I think, and as you reflect, it will allow you to get clarity to yourself actually. Maybe keep a blog, now it's so much easier to keep blogs and e-notes and things like that actually. But do spend some time on reflection, because that's the only way in which you kind of take stock of, what am I doing this okay? These are other things that I need to improve upon. And what are the learnings of some things which have not worked out very well? I think do that. Do that reflection is what I would say, which allows you to work on your personal growth actually. As you get into your career, and I think as you get into your career, I think what I would say is that, as I say, there's great power in starting actually. There's great power in starting. And dream big, I'm a big fan of Robin Sharma, but dream big, start small, but begin now. So as you kind of pass out of this place and sort of start looking for careers actually, I think yes, you have to dream big. I think it's everything is in the thinking actually. Everything is in the thinking. You think you want to be, I remember with Raghuram Rajan as a classmate actually. I remember, he is telling us, somebody asked me in Ahmedabad, what do I want to become? And he said, I want to become RBI governor some stage actually. Dream big, from 1986 to sort of think that I'll be the RBI governor was dream big. Not knowing how you'll get there, but dream big. I think it's very important. Because unless you sort of aspire to sort of dream big, and it is impossible actually, no problem. But at least you have something out there which is beyond your current reality. And I think that will sort of start pushing you in terms of going there actually. So therefore I would say dream big, start small. And I think Rishi alluded to, what kind of career actually. Is it an entrepreneurial career or is it a corporate career actually? I would say that a couple of things, from my own career. I began my career in ITC. I spent about 8.5 years in ITC. That's where the cigarettes part of my career comes from actually. I think one of the big things about career is that I think in the early years you do need a strong foundation actually. It's very important to get a strong foundation. The IIMs will give you a certain foundation in terms of academic excellence and competence and capabilities and all that. But that's more technical to some extent actually. It is less, the softer skills come up. You will learn a lot of the softer skills here, but in the real world you will learn that even greater. But what you need is a strong foundation, a foundation which will help you sort of demonstrate the technical excellence that you have picked up in campuses on your job, and also the abilities to sort of build some value systems, build some things around you actually. So you need a very strong foundation. So for those who want to go into a corporate career, I certainly think that it is important to sort of think about the kind of organization you want to join. I think it's important to think about the organization, because organizations can make a difference in terms of the indoctrination that comes in when you work with them in the formative years actually. And that's very, very important, and the right foundation will stand you in very good stead actually. So for those who want to do entrepreneurial, no problem. I think there you need to be even more reflective about yourself, because I think the learning, I mean, in a corporation, you get the benefit of learning from the senior people in the organization, actually. You know, for instance, when I joined ITC had a very structured way of inducting newcomers in finance. You know, we had something called an Accountants Training Institute. A retired general manager taught us, did classroom teaching. He not only taught us about the systems, processes, he also taught us about values. He also taught us how to drink a glass of beer, actually. It was compulsory. So I think it's part of the culture. So I'm saying that, you know, but there was somebody there who sort of, and we went through meeting a number of people over 18 months in terms of learning and understanding the values and culture of the place. And as we worked through, we got that foundation. But when you're entrepreneurial, you don't necessarily have that backstop, actually, in the sense that you don't necessarily have those mentors who can guide you through that. And that is where the power of self-reflection is going to be very important. And a case in point, there's a lot of articles which has been going around in the last few days about housing.com, actually, and Rahul Yadav, what he did, you know. I think Maverick at one level, brilliant at another level. The reality is that he built an organization which is valued at $200 million. He got SoftBank to sort of invest in it, actually. And yet, he got kicked out of the place. He gave up all his shareholding. Hopefully, he has made some money along the way for all the effort that he put in. But there are people who step back and say, gosh, could he have done it a little differently? I mean, could he have done it a little differently? I think creative brilliance is one part of it. But then, how do you transition from being an individual, creative, brilliant guy into an organization guy? I think and you can sort of not only sort of find a way to harness that creativity, but also make sure you work within certain norms. Whether those norms you agree with or not is not an issue. But I think I'm not a big believer in norms in that sense. But I think norms, you need to behave in a fashion which is not disruptive. Actually. So I think as you think about being entrepreneurial, I would certainly encourage you to sort of get more reflective. And if there are courses on the institute, you know, I was talking to one of your professors over lunch who spoke about, Seshadri, yes, and he was talking about inspired leadership from excellence. You know, I think take courses like that because as an entrepreneur you're pretty much on your own, and you're young, and that's great. You know, entrepreneurship is great because I think if there's a moment for taking risk, it is when you're starting a career. It is not, you know, and that is, you know, I've been a large organization man. So to that extent, I have been insulated from risk taking. You know, my brother, for instance, is a small organization. You know, I think he works for Shadi.com and he's been enjoying it actually, and he loves it. He absolutely loves working for organizations like Shadi.com. And not that he doesn't have a great academic background. He's from INSEAD actually. So I'm saying, you know, great academic career, but he chose to work in Shadi.com and is now like a CEO there actually, and has been working for a number of years actually. So I think the risk-taking ability is probably the greatest in your formative years actually. In fact, I remember one of my first people I met, in fact, while ITC was my first effective job, out of campus I actually joined ICICI, and I lasted a week. The reason I lasted a week was I wanted to be in the lending business, and the first 3 days I was put in the lending business, and then because I was a chartered accountant and they had some computer systems issues in SAP or something, the 4th day they posted me to back office accounting. It didn't make sense for me to sort of work in accounting in ICICI, so I sort of left. But I do remember the first manager I had on the first day, and she said, you know what, this is a time, you know, do some hardship, travel by train, stay far away. It's okay to be, some hardship is okay at this stage of life actually. So I would say that risk taking in the formative years is fine. In fact, there are a lot of people who are saying that, you know what, I will try and do whatever I can at the age of 25. And if I don't succeed, I will think of something organized and corporate and organized. So therefore, you know, while I may not be the best example of talking to you of what entrepreneur means, I certainly think that, you know, if you want to be entrepreneurial, there's no better time than as you pass out for the first 4 or 5 years, when you really don't have, you know, obligations, and, you know, and your mindset is still kind of clean. You know, you don't have your files in your mind in terms of safety nets and things like that. I mean, that's probably the best time to do that actually. But what is important is that dream big. Whatever you do, dream big. And careers, I think the first few years you must try and build a foundation. It sort of builds upon as you go forward actually. So that was my first 8 years in ITC. I started in Calcutta, moved to Guntur, and I remember the day the company, the practice in ITC was that you got, after a stint of 18 months, you got put in internal audit, and a year later, they post you to whichever division they think is appropriate for you. And the last thing I expected was to get posted in Guntur. And in 1988 or 1888, yes, Guntur was some back of beyond place actually, not even connected there. If you were to go to Hyderabad and take a train, or go to Chennai and take a train actually. A rural setting, and that was a setting where we used to buy tobacco from farmers, and there was a leaf processing center actually. But you know what, some of the best experiences I had was in Guntur actually. Absolutely the best experience. And I met my wife there actually. So you never know where life takes you actually. So I think, and then of course, I moved from Hyderabad, from Guntur to Hyderabad. From Hyderabad I moved to Bombay, and from Bombay I moved to Dubai, and I came back to Canada. So my 8 years in ITC, I think was wonderful in terms of not just learning about values, systems, processes, culture, the movements across. I think it built me up. Looking back at my career, it certainly built me up in terms of the fundamentals actually. And then of course I took a shift in career. I joined ILFS in the financial services actually. I did want to, when you pass out of Ahmedabad as a chartered accountant in industry at that point. But you know what, when you see many of your classmates around you who have gone into investment banking, it seems like an exotic world, and therefore I said, let me sort of try my hand in investment banking. And ILFS sort of took me on as an investment banker, corporate advisory and stuff like that. And it was great. It was absolutely great because one, I didn't know anything about investment banking when I joined. And second thing was that as an ITC, what happens is that you are an internal company. You have your networks, but the networks are all within the company. Whereas when you're an ILFS, you're an advisory man, investment banker with your own budgets to achieve, which means you need to get revenue for the company. And suddenly you're meeting the managing directors and the CFOs of companies. Morning it could be cement, afternoon it could be hotels, evening it could be something else actually. And you are a youngster, maybe 7-8 years of experience. I was probably 30 or something like that at that point, 30, 31. And then you are meeting CFOs and managing directors and telling them about their business actually. And hard, very hard actually. In fact, I think the two big learnings for me in ILFS, the first learning was that, 2-3 learnings I would say. I think number one, I think my boss used to say, this happens in organizations. People are always trying to do one-upmanship vis-a-vis each other, one another within the organization. So there's no point in being internal tigers actually. What is important is to be external tigers. And that is a very big learning. And secondly, what he said was that the first time you meet a client, let's say you go and meet the CFO of Hindustan Lever as an example, the first time he will give you an appointment, not because he knows you, but because he knows that you're coming from ILFS, which means the card opens the door for your first meeting. But try and get a second meeting, the card is no longer relevant. It's the impact that you had in the first meeting which will get you the second meeting. And that puts a huge amount of pressure on you in terms of saying that if I'm meeting the CFO of Hindustan Lever as an example, how do I ensure that I talk sense in that meeting? I may not get a business from Hindustan Lever, but the first objective is to make sure that we talk sense in that meeting, which means every meeting had to be prefaced with lots of research. You're literally scrambling to understand, and these were not necessarily pre-internet days where information was not necessarily available widely, and you used to go and sort of learn, talk to people, understand, go through balance sheets, and then sort of, and you go with, you just don't go and meet a CFO or a managing director of a company without an agenda. Because what is your agenda? Your agenda is that you need to get some mandate from him so that you can build some 25 lakhs or 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs, whatever, that's what you're trying to do. And so it's not as if that the CFO or the managing director has kind of told you, what, this is my problem, come and help me. No, he's not said that. So the beauty of the investment banking business is that you end up trying to understand from the other person and sort of create and sort of build a case for you helping them on a certain issue actually. So when you go and meet the client, you need to have a certain sense of saying, okay, Hindustan Lever has got these growth challenges, and maybe there's something I can do in marketing to support, or whatever would be the problem actually. So you need to think about all of that when you go in it. It's scary stuff. First time you do, you're literally mortified actually, because you could make a fool of yourself in that meeting completely actually. And I don't want to make a fool of yourself actually. And so that's so important. So that was a big learning for me in terms of how do you build that tolerance for ambiguity, the learning, the expertise to sort of bring it all together at short notice and sort of be able to communicate cogently, even if you don't get a piece of business. at least in terms of making sure the door is open for you to meet him another time, maybe 6 months later. I think, and the beauty and the tough thing about investment banking is that you make 10 such meetings, you will, or 10 or 20 such meetings you do, you'll probably get 2 leads, or 3 leads actually. And the 3 leads you work on, you'll probably convert it to 1 mandate. And so therefore you need to meet 20 different people to get 1 business actually. And that's hard work, And the third thing you do learn in investment banking is that the networking becomes very important actually. You learn to network. You learn to know people actually. You learn, and you need to be able to get network to a point where you could pick up a phone call to the CEO of CFO of a company or a managing director of a company and say, can I come and have a cup of tea? You need to build relationships up to that level. So I think IFS kind of externalized me completely actually, in terms of, and also it made me more strategic, because in ITC what I was doing a lot of work, it was less strategic actually. It was all operational to a great extent. There was some element of strategy. But when you go into investment banking, it suddenly made me strategic. But I'm convinced of one thing, that the grounding that ITC gave me was very useful in terms of allowing me to understand these strategic issues. For instance, when a CFO talks about problems that he faces, because you work in a company like ITC, you intrinsically understand what he's trying to say. Otherwise, you don't understand. So I've always believed that it is better to do a stint in industry before you get into investment banking or places like that, because you're then far more grounded in terms of what you speak. Not that you can't make a career in investment banking without going to industry, but it's much hard. It takes a little more effort, because you need to understand the problems. So I think that is a path I took actually. That was another 4.5 years, and then I said, okay, I'm chasing CFOs and CEOs. Why not I become a CFO? So that was the kind of thinking, and that is when Shoppers Stop kind of came along, and somebody had to give me a break, so because there are lots of people who have been CFOs before, and it's not easy to become a CFO. And I know tons of people, who are probably 50 today, who say, gosh, where can I become a CFO? Even if a 100 crore company wants to make me a CFO, I would love it actually. But no, so somebody had to give me a break, and Shoppers Stop came along, and they were happy enough to sort of offer me the CFO role actually. And that was a big break for me in my life actually, a very big break. And I think, but that was great. I mean, a great stint. I learned a little bit about retail industry at that point in time. And there was some private equity which had come in, so because of my financial services background, I was able to deal effectively with them and things like that. And then from cigarettes to retail, the boost will happen in my career. I learned Diageo. I think Diageo, in fact, to a lot of extent, I think Diageo kind of defined a lot of what I am today. I did 3 stints at Diageo. I think the first stint was as the CFO for South Asia. And then I moved on to Singapore, where I was the regional finance director for Asia. And then I went on to London, where I was the global M&A director. Fantastic stints actually. But more than the technical aspects of the stint, I think the number of learnings there actually. Due to certain circumstances, I think I had to, when I was in Diageo in Bombay, we were selling a part of the business. 3 months after I joined, we decided to sell one part of the business actually. And my managing director decided to bid for that business. And when you're bidding for a business, you can no longer be the managing director. So suddenly, 3 months into that company, I became the managing director of India actually. So for a year or so, I sort of had to do the divestment, run an organization, and suddenly got exposed to a multinational world where India is but a small part of a global company. And there were some 30 people from London and different parts of the world who were in touch with me, because I was the key guy in India in terms of how is business going, how is M&A going, and also I had to take some very difficult decisions in terms of saying that as we sold the business, how many of the people would stay back in the Diageo, how many of the people would go with the divestment, and how many people we had to let go. And it matured. It gave me a huge sense of maturity in terms of the being a general manager and running a country in that sense actually. So that was big learning actually, big learning. And then of course, very quickly I moved to Singapore. And Singapore, the first time I was actually working, while I worked in ITC in Dubai, that was more internal ITC. But when I moved to Singapore a few years later as part of Diageo, I was working truly in an international setting, because we had multinational managers. My boss had come from Argentina, my colleague marketing director had come from Africa, and and I had come from India, and we were literally very entrepreneurial. You talk of entrepreneurship, you can be entrepreneurial in companies. We were setting up the regional office, and we were operating out of a Suntec City business center, tiny room, where three of us were sitting, and we had no infrastructure. In fact, little room, and I remember pulling wires to make sure my Wi-Fi works, and kind of doing our own bookings and going and getting things actually. So while we were in a big company, we literally were entrepreneurial in terms of trying to set the agenda and deciding what we want to do next actually. And of course, it gave me a lot of opportunity to travel around the patch. And what you learn in a multicultural environment as you kind of travel around, that's a big learning again. Because what happens is that you go to Indonesia. Indonesia was part of my patch. I would go spend time in Indonesia and sit with the finance director and say, you know what, this problem is there. These are the 5 actions that you need to do. And he would say, yes, I will get it. A month later, I'll visit. Has anything moved? Nothing. So what happens in multicultural situations is that when in some cultures, people hesitate to say no. So which means that, when they say yes, it is no longer, it's not a yes at all. And so, so you learn to navigate through these multicultural, environments actually. And what then happens is that, what then happens is that when you're working across multicultures, nobody is really reporting to you directly. They're all part of the country organizations. But then they have a dotted line with you because you are the regional finance director actually. So the role becomes one of influence actually. If I were a boss with a team directly reporting to me, I can say, Abhi karo, just get this done. It's far more easier to be director with a team which reports to you directly and where I'm involved in the performance appraisal of the employee. But if I'm not the line manager who's doing the performance appraisal of the employee and he's in a different country and the relationship is more dotted line, then to get things done out of him is far more based on personal influence. And to get that personal influence is pretty much like what you learned in investment banking. How do you influence a CFO or a managing director in investment banking? Is the same skill sets you sort of use to sort of build your influence with colleagues and other people across the patch actually. So one thing I certainly recommend to all of you is that I think visiting overseas, a lot of Indians say, you know what, I've been to all these places and all these are tourism visits actually. But if you do get a chance to sort of work in any of these countries outside, and I'm not sure about Dubai as a destination, but Singapore, Hong Kong, London, US, if you get a chance to work at least for some part of your career in any of these places, I think I would certainly say that do it. Because I certainly think that you get a very, very different lens of what it means to work in places like that. And honestly, it's great for the family as well, not just for you and from a professional perspective, but honestly for the family as well, because as you bring up your kids and all that, they get kind of indoctrinated, they have their own exposures actually. So one certain learning for all of you is that if you get a chance to sort of work outside of it, I think do that actually. Though I would certainly say one thing, Asia is the happening place in this actually. So a lot of people I know want to come to India and work. A lot of people I know want to come to Asia and work actually. Europe is kind of, if you see what's happening in Europe, if you see what's happening, US of course is growing a bit now, but otherwise it's the opportunities, the flexibilities are far greater in places like Asia actually. So I would say Asia is fantastic. So therefore, I don't think today is a time when you sort of say that I want to go to your US because that pays me better. I think that's no longer true. Because largely I think you get paid in India what you can get paid internationally also, by and large. By and large, I don't think money is a motivator for you to go and work internationally. You can make the same amount of money there actually. But certainly the experience can be life-changing, not just for yourself, but also for the family actually. And then of course, I moved to London, which was corporate headquarters of a global company, and Diageo is probably a 30-40 billion organization actually. And you work for a global headquarters, you really understand. And one big learning for me was it was a job where I was strategy and M&A director, and we were really going to different countries to help them out on country strategies and M&A across the world. So I would be in Japan one day, Russia the other day, Venezuela the third day, Ireland, Poland, Greece. I traveled all over the place actually, and 200 days plus I was on a plane all the time actually. And tough while I did it, because every Monday morning I was on a plane. The great thing was on a Friday evening I would be back home actually, whichever part of the world I was in. So that certainly helped in terms of making some semblance of balance between family and the work life actually. But the beauty was this, one of the things you learn, you will get to know in conversations when you work in India, is that if something works in Bombay, let's say you're working in a consumer marketing strategy in Bombay, does it work in Chennai? If something works in Chennai, can it work in Delhi? And you talk of these cultural differences even across the country, the Northern Isles, whatever. But when you're sitting in a global headquarters, we would actually think, if I'm trying to develop a global growth driver for a Johnny Walker brand, Diageo is known for Johnny Walker as an example. If it works in Venezuela, can it work in Poland? If it works in Poland, can it work in Vietnam? And that perspective is just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Because, it doesn't come easily. And you sort of relate to it. Because, it's not an academic discussion to sort of say, how do I know it works in Vietnam? But because you work in these countries, you sort of say, yes, of course, I can see that. I can see that it might just work with the consumer in Vietnam, actually. It might just work with the consumer in Poland. Or it may not work in a different context. What works in an anglicized environment may not work in an Eastern. I remember, we used to, when I was in Asia, we were trying to, every brand, you learn this in marketing about key brand benefit. Or what is the key brand benefit of a particular brand, actually. And Guinness was a brand, it's a great drink, actually. And if you go to UK, the brand benefit for Guinness is inner strength. Inner strength is supposed to represent a person with a lot of inner strength to do things, actually. But talk about explaining inner strength to somebody in China. He doesn't know what inner strength means, actually. So the question is, you are trying to sell the same brand, and global brand benefits are not supposed to change. Coca-Cola's brand benefit in Asia is supposed to be the same as the key brand benefit in the US, actually. But how do you interpret inner strength, which is understood in an Anglo-Saxon environment in the Western world, and translate it effectively into a marketing strategy where the consumer understands inner strength in Asia is such fun, actually. And you have to really think through what does inner strength mean. So we came up with a campaign, where we had some movie star who had kind of done something fantastic, and then we said, why not you? And we came up with another example of somebody who had done something fantastic, and then we said, why not you? The whole campaign became, why not you? And then we said, okay, and why not you really represented for us, saying that, don't you have the courage within yourself to do what he has done? And that was a nice way of sort of interpreting inner strength here in Asia, in an Asian context. So you learn these kind of cultural nuances while working internationally, which you don't pick up, actually. And sometimes, and you learn a lot sometimes, and there are lots of great aspects of cultures, actually. Like, for instance, in the UK when I was working, I wouldn't say that the people were brilliant. In fact, I do think that the people in Asian context in India are far more intelligent than what you find people in UK. But it's very predictable. You go to a business meeting, there are 5 of you sitting together in a business meeting, and you're discussing a particular problem. And as you're discussing a problem, you say, okay, you know what, I think I will have to, these are 3-4 steps to be done. And I will say, I will do this step, and I will do it in the next 10 days. And you say, you will do this step, and you do it in the next 15 days. And the third person says, I will do it in the next 8 days, actually. And you know what, the discipline is there in terms of getting it done in the next 7 days, 8 days, 15 days, actually. And if one of them is not able to do it, he will come and tell you, you know what, I'm stuck, I will take 3 more days, actually. In many other countries, like Poland, Ireland, it's very much like Asia, to an extent. People don't want to come to meetings. And the promises that they make will not get implemented. So you need somebody with a very strong project manager to say, gosh, tell me guys, have you done it? So I'm saying, sometimes predictability is great. And in India, for instance, you use Jugaad. She is a big, author on innovation, actually. But Jugaad sometimes, can be very destructive, actually. Because, suddenly somebody interprets saying, you know what, why bother doing all these 10 steps in terms of doing it? I can do this shortcut. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work because the guy is not thought through, and there's a rationale for those 10 steps which you have to do to achieve something. And the Jugaad doesn't work sometimes. Equally, Jugaad is responsible for all the creative stuff that we do in India. There are so many such examples. You read about, somebody spending millions of dollars or doing something, and somebody here in India doing it for a fraction of the cost. So Jugaad certainly, there's some very valuable things about Jugaad in terms of how creative, low-cost innovation can help, actually. But in a work situation, sometimes it can be extremely frustrating in terms of saying that, how it can be so disruptive, actually. So I think, and then of course I came back to India because I think the company wanted me to go to Russia, so I didn't want to live in Russia. They wanted me to go back to Russia because I had done work there, and I was seen as some emerging market specialist, so they said to that value. But I certainly didn't want to take my family there. Came back to India and worked in that development. And I think, and that's the other thing, actually. While I explain the story of mine, it might all sound glamorous, actually. But life is not about glamour. I remember ITC was fantastic, clear, yes. But when I was working in Dubai, I was working for the International Business Division. I do not know whether you remember your history of 20 years old, but Chuk, the chairman of ITC, had this big ambition of making ITC $1 billion sosha, as he called it, in terms of the export, the Kyrex suits and all that. Whatever, he had some big ambitions about ITC being the big export house from India, actually. but there were no processes, no risk management systems actually. And the the experience in Dubai was actually disastrous, absolutely disastrous. We sort of were trading, we were buying steel from some place and selling to somewhere else. We were buying soybean from some other place and selling to somewhere else actually. All because we wanted the turnover actually. There was no risk management system, we lost money, huge loss of the balance sheet, the company got wound up actually. So it's not glamorous, and when you are part of that, sometimes you don't realize that you're part of it actually. You don't realize you're part of it, you know. And then it hits you, gosh, you know, what is it that has happened actually. So it's not always glamorous, guys. You know, I think it's very important to understand that life is not about glamour. Life is not about the smooth, you know, path actually. There will be times when you just go down and go up actually. And that's when I think what you need to do is to keep the faith actually. Absolutely keep the faith. It's so important to keep the faith. And ITC was one bad experience in Dubai. Those 2 years were disastrous. And part of the reason why even after I came back to Calcutta in corporate planning, I said enough is enough, I need to move. Partly driven by my interest to go to investment banking, partly driven by sort of saying, you know what, I've had my time in ITC. I just want to move on actually. And you know, and I think what it tests you, I think one of the big learnings for me in terms of keeping the faith is your own resilience actually. It's extremely important to build resilience. Because I think it's not necessarily the hard work, the intelligence and all that which helps you. But as you go through the ups and downs, you need the resilience. And especially if some of you are going to think about entrepreneurship as a way of taking your career forward actually, you need extraordinary amount of resilience. I think build it, work on it actually. I think, and as long as you build your resilience, you will find that it stands you in very good stead actually, very good stead. And I think work on your resilience, be conscious about it actually. Because you know, ultimately, you know, I think it's a very, you know, as people say, you know, the day has been bad. You know, like I began by saying today is a great day. Like let's say yesterday was a bad day. It's okay, that's yesterday, it's gone. So today can be a better day actually. So I mean, and people say, you know, today is the first day of the rest of your life. But it's absolutely true. So even if you've had a bad day, I think it's you know, you have a chance to sort of redeem yourself by looking at things differently. The important thing is, are you learning from that experience and moving on? That is what is important. And the reason I'm saying so is that I think I came back to India and I worked for Aditya Birla Retail, and that was a time Aditya Birla Group invited me. Great people actually. And McKinsey had told all of us, I mean, and the company had already been set up by the time I had come. And retail was the kind of future. And people said, build stores. Sam Walton had said, build, and they will come. Actually. That's what Sam Walton had said. And you know, the whole thing was about building stores and getting valuations for, you know, stock market valuations and kind of exiting. And the Aditya Birla Group normally invests through a company called Aditya Birla Nuvo. Aditya Birla Nuvo is like the incubating arm of the Aditya Birla Group actually. Unfortunately, that didn't happen because the advice that Mr. Birla had got at that point of time is put your own money, it's all about valuations. You put 500 crores, you know what, you get 5,000 crores at the end of the day actually. Or whatever such number actually, it didn't happen. And you know, I had come back to India at the end of 2000. Yeah. So I think, and I think what happened was that 2008, Lehman Brothers crash, all that happened actually. And then the whole valuation thing kind of collapsed actually. And then of course, and then when that happened, the whole structure of the company changed actually. And you know, so that is not necessarily a great experience that you go through, even though you're the CFO of a company and you sort of wonder what could have been done better actually. But the point is that, you know, I think there are great learnings as you kind of go through the different paths of your career actually. And I'll just say one more thing, I'll just come to, you know, I just have 5 more minutes, but I'll talk about the third aspect, what is about the campus, what is about the way you look at your careers actually. And the third one is about life itself actually. I think you need, you know, as you know, this is a big one actually. You know, the purpose of life is a life purpose. It's absolutely true. Ultimately, you know, you need to think about, you know, a legacy. You need to think about what kind of a legacy that you leave behind actually. And you might say, I'm 20, what do I think about the legacy? You know, and that's probably is completely kind of an oxymoron in terms of saying legacy, really 20 years old actually. But do think, and it may not be apparent at this point in time, but as you sort of go forward in your career, I think about authenticity. Because ultimately, I think what is very important as you go through life, whether it's your career, whether it's your family, whether it's your kids, whether it is your ecosystem, think about the values that matter to you. Think about the values that matter to you. And think about building an authentic life, because there's no substitute for authentic life. You know, you can't fake the way you live actually. It's impossible. People would make, it's like, who's this Bobby Jindal who says, you know what, It's not Indian Americans or Afro-Asians or whatever actually. It's Americans, he says. And he's got a portrait which is white. He's not, and people are sort of laughing at him actually. And not just Indians were laughing at him, but also I think the question is he authentic actually? So I think I would certainly encourage you by sort of asking you to think about how do you sort of be authentic actually. And don't be afraid to walk out of situations if you think that authenticity is not there in situations. I think don't compromise the authenticity bit of it. Because if you compromise your authenticity bit, you kill once. You might say, you know what, it's okay, I'll kill once, but it's gone. You lost your authenticity there actually. So think about the authenticity. So I think I will just end there by saying that I think you guys are all very privileged. Make the most of this career campus life that you have for the period of time that you have and build your capabilities. And as you go through career, as Steve Jobs and all said, you can't connect the dots forward. Really can't think of what will happen to you. And I think this is quite nice to sort of see. Direction matters. I think what you can do at this stage of life as you go to career is the direction. I think, and direction also you may not know east, west, north or south actually. But if it feels right, it's the right direction actually. But directionally, just think about how you kind of take things forward actually. But and be authentic. I think that's the third message. And finally, I would simply say this actually. I think have fun, guys. This is a very simple thing which I picked up. It's brilliant actually. Be present, make love, make feel, avoid small talk, embrace conversations, whatever. I think don't lose that bit actually. Because there is this. I would encourage you to see this TED talk on happiness at work. The traditional formula is hard work is equal to success is equal to happiness. This talk just reverses it. He says that why not begin with happiness? And then your oxytocin levels is kind of at the right levels in terms of taking lead to better success actually. So reverse it. So do enjoy the life, guys actually. And ultimately I will simply say this, guys. You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself in any direction you choose. You are on your own. Remember that. You are on your own actually. And you know what you know. And you are the one who will decide where to go actually. I think I will leave it there. I think you guys are far more mature than what I was when I was your age actually. So I have no doubt in my mind that you will have some glorious careers and we'll read about you in a few years from time in the newspaper actually. All the very best. Of course, it's challenging to sort of walk into a new industry. I would say tolerance for ambiguity is probably going to be very important actually. And even if you're in a single vertical, tolerance for today is a VUCA word. I think as you say, it's volatile, uncertain, whatever you call it, it's a VUCA word. So there's always uncertainty. I think tolerance for ambiguity is going to be a very, very key attribute actually. And the second thing is that be confident. I think. A lot of it depends on your own confidence. I would encourage you not to lose that confidence. Because you may be the greatest person, but if you sort of, as they say, be a shrinking violet, I think you probably won't succeed. So I would encourage you to be confident actually, and take it as it comes. And then don't go with any preconceived notions about what a different industry might throw at you. Take it as it comes, and trust yourself to sort of use your experience and use the benefit of others' wisdom. And don't be afraid to ask for help actually, in terms of going into other industries. And whatever. Yeah.
So, you have worked with many international companies and in many international venues. If you have to rate those people, that is the Japanese, the Russians, the Argentinians, the Indians, where do you rate and whom would you rate the first and where do you rate Indians in that ratings? My second question will be, you have traveled a lot. So how hard it has hit your personal life, the time with your family? You said you flew every Friday to your home, but I don't think that will be the case all the Fridays.
Sure.
So how hard is that to your family life?
Yeah, no, I think the first part of the question in terms of who is better, I don't think there's a simple answer to the question. I think it's probably no answer to that question. Who is better? I think everybody is good at what he does. Is what I would say. as far as the second question is that, this work-life balance is really an issue sometimes actually. And you do sometimes need to make choices, and I think the question is always that, I would say that I don't think happiness at work without happiness in the family is sustainable beyond a point of time, is what I would say. There's probably periods of time where you can sort of afford to do that, I think, but not beyond. So I think family is a very intrinsic part. Remember that when you have your ups and downs in life, you need somebody. The beauty about a family is that it gives you unconditional love. Unconditional. They don't care whether you have a job which pays you whatever it does, or you're unemployed. Your family gives you the love unconditionally, and you need that support system. It nurtures in a huge sense actually. So I don't think you can take choices which are very different from, which are completely, keeping the family out of the equation. You can't do that. You can't do that actually. But up to a point, yes, sometimes it makes sense, to sort of say, okay, it's an investment I will do for a couple of years and I will travel and things like that. But it doesn't get sustainable beyond a point.
Since you have traveled to a lot of places and have global perspective of all the markets as well as the culture and people throughout the globe, when do you see India moving from Make in India campaign to a Develop in India campaign?
I think we are getting there. I would say that, see, different countries have their different growth paths. Who would have thought, in the 1970s we were talking about a Hindu rate of growth. Clearly in the last 15-20 years it's been dramatic actually. And things are changing, and I think the beauty of India is what I would say is the entrepreneurship. I always compare this between India and China. China, the growth has been driven by public sector spending, huge investments in infrastructure and things like that, but a little about entrepreneurship. Whereas India is truly a nation of shopkeepers. The entrepreneurship kind of is there everywhere. Whether it's the milkman who gives you the milk, or whether the pavada that you buy somewhere, or whatever you do. I think it's a nation of entrepreneurs actually. And so I think I will certainly never lose my optimism for India actually. It can be hard, I think, in India sometimes it's never a straight line from between point A to point B. It's probably A to C to D to F to then D actually, but it's probably never a straight line. But that's okay. That's okay. I think that drives the diversity and the richness of India actually. And I would sort of simply leave it there. Actually. And Indians have a huge amount of resilience. Huge amount of resilience. Yeah. I think corporate governance, I think, if you see the scandals which come out of the US, they're of a scale which are greater than what you have seen in India actually, that's for sure. Lehman Brothers or Arthur Andersen's of the early 2000s and all. So I guess there is human nature and human behavior, so there are always scandals in governance. I think from a corporate perspective, I would say that shareholder wealth maximization is clearly a very important objective actually. Though of course, triple bottom lines in terms of the other, well, let's keep that aside for a minute actually. I think a lot of family-owned organizations do exist in India, and that's true globally as well. And this was my conversation with some of the promoters that I used to work with. And the promoter would be 70% shareholder, and 30% would be the consumers, and the public shareholders in the institution. And the market cap would be say 25,000 crores. I would always remind the promoter, the 25,000 crore market cap does not happen because the promoter, of course it happens because of the promoter's work in building the company, but it is also paid for by the balanced 30% shareholder actually. So, who actually puts their money in and believes that this company will grow bigger actually. And therefore I would always say that, don't forget that, because if you forget that, I take Wockhardt, I worked as a CFO. I came in when the company, I joined Wockhardt in 2010 when there were 1,000 crores of losses actually. And then when I left, we had a 1,500 crore of profit. When I joined, the market cap was 1,200 crores. When I left, it was 23,000 crores actually. And it takes a long time to build confidence actually. So corporate governance is all about making sure that your stakeholders are respected and treated the same way as you would treat yourself. And one of the things, as you go into financial management, one of the things you will learn in the first chapter in financial management is a concept called agency costs. And what are agency costs? Agency costs are nothing but if I am a shareholder in a company and I appoint managers who kind of do the work, which is what happens in corporations. The question is, can I expect the managers to work all the time in a fashion which maximizes the shareholders' interests actually? And the answer is no, because managers will take decisions which may not be maximizing shareholders' wealth all the time actually. And this gap is called the agency cost, where the risk that a manager doesn't behave in a fashion which maximizes the shareholder value is agency cost. And what I used to tell promoters is that, guys, you are owning 70% of the shareholder of the company. You're also the CEO of the company. These are instances where the promoter is creating his own agency costs. He wants maximum value for himself as a shareholder, but he takes actions as a CEO which creates shareholder costs, agency costs for himself actually. It's a very interesting thing. So therefore I would say that people learn. And I think the beauty, I would encourage you to read that book by Morgan Stanley, which talks about, who's that guy, Ruchir Sharma. I think he's written a book a couple of days ago. And I think he calls it, one of the defining things he talks about is, which prompted him to write the book is, he went to a party in Gurgaon farmhouse actually. And the son of that rich Gurgaon businessman, when he introduced himself saying, I'm Ruchir from Morgan Stanley, New York, apparently that son said, where else will you invest? So the whole theme of the book is where else would your money go actually? And the reason that becomes important is that today, the public shareholders or the institutional shareholders are so powerful actually, and they have a choice. They have a choice of investing in your company, they have a choice in investing in your company, they have a choice in investing in his company. And they will unhesitatingly move money from your company to his company if you're not happy with it, and in the process, drop the market value, and you lose in the process actually. And therefore, corporate governance is basically about recognizing that if you do not do what is kind of right for the stakeholders and the shareholders in your company, you stand to lose actually. It doesn't matter. I remember meeting a fund in the US, I think it was Janus. It is a $2 trillion fund. He says, Giri, we are a country, he said actually. And therefore, when he talks about investing $10 million in my company, it's nothing. It's a rounding off in his investment portfolio. He doesn't want to hassle. If he knows your company is not following the corporate governance, why the hell would he kind of invest $10 million into your share and explain to some committee as to why he invested actually? He doesn't want challenges actually. If he has invested money on the hope that you will behave well and you don't, he will just move it out. Even if he has to incur a $3 million loss in a $2 trillion fund, it doesn't make a bloody difference. So I think governance is about recognizing that you need to sort of be fair to your stakeholders. Otherwise, the loser is you actually. And I would say that Indians are fast learners. I think the beauty about mistakes is that if you get beaten up, you don't want to make the same mistake again. So I would say that I don't think there's a uniform answer in terms of, is corporate governance better in India versus other companies? Is corporate governance better in a family-owned company vis-a-vis the non-family-owned companies? Because the reality is that if you see the majority of industries globally, there are enough studies there. Most companies, majority of companies are all family-owned actually. So you can't say that family-owned businesses are bad. They have created wealth. All the Samsung families, you see so many families. There are different models of governance though. There are models of governance where the promoter is kind of driving it himself actually. There are models of governance like ABB, for instance, in Sweden, where the family doesn't run the company. They are in a family council, and then they have CEOs who are professional managers. So there are different models in which families have sought to reorient the way they work. So I would say, I think it's part of a continuum is what I would say. You see bad examples and good examples all over. And I guess people are all on the journey. Right? Yeah. Sure.